Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the midterm elections and getting reaction from those who know the issues best. Micah Rasmussen is the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. He's standing by. First up, though, we're going to take a look at the polls with pollster Patrick Murray. So let's get to it. Joining me now is Patrick Murray. He is the director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute. Patrick, good to see you. You've been very busy since the election and haven't stopped, really.
No, I haven't. The election keeps going on and on, as we expected it would.
Right. So how did they do? Did they get it right this time?
Well, some of us did. Some of us didn't. And I think what happened is that the narrative nationally about this red wave coming was driven by a lot of those aggregators who were relying on a lot of Republican-leaning polls out there, Insider Advantage and Trafalgar, those polls that tend to be a little bit more Republican overall, that were better 2 years ago, but not good this year. And because their methodology is based on enthusiasm, and Republicans had more enthusiasm going into this election, but it wasn't enthusiasm that motivated voters to go out. Democrats said, I'm not happy with the way things are going. I think we should be doing better. I don't think, maybe Biden's not doing everything that I want him to do, but there's too much at risk in this election. I'm going to go out and vote. And that's what a lot of those Republican pollsters missed, is the motivation. And the academic pollsters like Monmouth University, Marist, Siena, we pretty much had it, on the mark in the races that we were looking at, that it was going to be a tight contest, no doubt about it. But the Democrats were going to get their voters out in enough numbers to win those key races.
Yeah. So from a polling perspective, what are your takeaways from the midterm elections? There really weren't any major surprises, but what are some of the other things that, as you're starting to take a look at what went right, what went wrong, takeaways?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we thought was possible was that Democrats had a disadvantage because they had so many different pockets of voters who were motivated by different issues: abortion, gun control, climate change, just democracy itself, and the integrity of elections. And we thought, it's going to be hard to message to those voters and get them all out. What happened is they didn't need the message, is that they were worried about those things without Democrats having to hit at them. So they came out and voted in enough numbers, whereas Republicans really hammered away at this crime issue, immigration, on top of the overriding issue, which was the economy and inflation. But it got out their base, but I think it helped turn off some of those Democratic voters who were motivated by those other things and made them even more likely to come out, so that red wave did not materialize.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it typically, as we're watching the election results come in, it was expected. Republicans should should control the House, and they should have had way bigger numbers than they did. Why didn't they?
Yeah,
and everybody's pointing fingers now. Was it the candidate? Was it the message? Can you even say what it is?
Yes, it's the brand. It's the brand of the Republican Party that really is hurting them right now. And it's something that we saw, ironically, we saw it 2 years ago with the unexpectedly close race with, or 1 year ago, I should say, with the unexpectedly close race of Phil Murphy, his 3-point victory there, is that we saw a number of different patterns emerge. One of which was these working class white voters in southern New Jersey, and these not struggling, but these suburbs that really hand to mouth, trying to make ends meet, it really swung to the Republican Party. But there are core parts of formerly Republican areas, such as, let's take Somerset County for an example, where those voters had always been Republican, and then in the Trump era they rejected that brand. That the Republican brand, and switched over to the Democratic Party. They held in the 2021 gubernatorial, and they held in this year as well. There was, in fact, Democrats did better in some of those areas than they did in 2020. Even if they lost, they still did better. And I think that was one of the key things that we learned there, is that this culture wars that Trump has brought to the dynamic has really separated our body politic our voters. But that separation has held in a way that has helped Democrats in some ways. And you see some, there are very few Republicans who are willing to stand up to that. But you see some like Senator John Bramnick, for example, who continues to try to beat the drum of saying, this is not the right way to do things. This is not good for the Republican Party. This is not good for democracy. Now he's looking at the election results and turning around saying, look, it's not even good for us to try to win elections with this kind of thing, let alone the fact that it's just simply not a good way to run government. And he's still getting pushback from the Republican Party. So I think the Republican Party is still a ways off from getting back to the brand that used to win them elections.
Yeah, but in the 7th Congressional District, where Democrat Tom Malinowski was the incumbent, he was beat out by Republican Tom Kean Jr. So can you talk a little bit about how that happened? Tom Kean Jr. had run in 2020 and did not win. Former state senator, also son of the former governor, but he was able to pull off a win. Why?
Well, yeah, I mean, the issue there is really redistricting. That's what it comes down to. So we have a new map. You have to draw a new map every 10 years because of population shifts. And the map that was drawn for the 7th district brought in a heck of a lot of Republican voters up into the northwest corner of New Jersey. Overall, Democrats did not do as well this year as they did 2 years ago for the House. They won the House vote statewide by 16 points. They only won it by about 9 points or so this time around. And in Malinowski's district, that would have meant, he would have lost his old district. But if you look at the individual votes, he actually lost Hunterdon County, which was in his district 2 years ago and this year, by about 10 points this year. And it was about 11.5 points 2 years ago. So he actually did slightly better in that loss. And so his argument was that by adding that huge swath of Republican vote in the Northwest was that was why he couldn't win the race. And in fact, I think if you look at the entire map, it helped all the other Democrats. The other Democrats outperformed in most cases what they should have performed if they were in their old districts. They still would have won in their old districts, but it really bolstered those other Republicans at the other Democrats at the expense of Tom Malinowski. And of course, there's a lot of things that we can say about that map, whether it was gerrymandered or not, but there was a possibility to draw a map that would have preserved Malinowski, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. Right, because like you said, every 10 years the districts are redrawn, and it's supposed to be half Republican, half Democrat with a tiebreaker. So, typically when maps are drawn, they protect the incumbents. But this time it looks like they didn't even try. Some people are saying the Democrats, they kind of knew they were sacrificing Tom Malinowski.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of rules that govern congressional redistricting, such as the representation of different ethnic groups, different races as well, that you have to maintain in order to meet certain standards and principles. But of course, there are different incumbents who had their cheerleaders on the redistricting commission, and that helped them. And it's kind of like a domino effect. To make a map, you can't just move one area. You got to move all the areas around the map. And what happened was, Donald Norcross down in the 1st district in South Jersey wanted to make sure he protected his district, so that he got more Democrats in his district, and that shifted the map around to a different area where they wanted to protect Andy Kim. But Frank Pallone has this very stringy district because he wants to keep Long Branch in the 6th district because Long Branch is his hometown. He had his cheerleader, his advocate, leading the Democrats on that. So that meant that once he kept that forced a whole bunch of other things to happen and made it harder for Democrats to give Malinowski a couple more Democratic voters and hold on to a 10-2 map. Not saying that a 10-2 map is the best map to have. There are a lot of problems with the map, the way that it's drawn in terms of communities of interest being separated in order to get to the map that they got. But if that was your only consideration, Democrats could have probably tried a little harder and gotten a map that preserved all of their incumbents.
Yeah. So what type of lessons are you taking away, or is there any information that you're looking at and are saying you're kind of surprised at that and applying that moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing here is that we have an unpopular president, a bad economy, and that's a recipe for the party out of power to clean up, and they did not. So then you have to turn your attention to why not. And it comes down to the Republican brand. The Republican brand under Trump is just not a brand that sells here in New Jersey. As long as that continues to be the brand, it's going to have significant impact. And it used to be in the old days that whatever the Republican brand was nationally was different than it was in New Jersey. And while we still have some of those differences, they have kind of come together and converged a little bit so that we see the Republican brand hurting Republicans in local races where they would have done better in the past. So we have fewer swing areas in New Jersey and more of these clearly Democratic or clearly Republican areas now. And kind of that's also just feeding this political divide that we have in our environment today.
Yeah. So you're saying that Republicans in New Jersey, they used to be a different, as young people, it's different. They're just a different kind of Republican, but you're saying they're not so much anymore, or they are?
They're not being able to differentiate themselves. The New Jersey Republicans are no longer being able to differentiate themselves from the National Republican Party that's concerned with cultural issues, that's concerned with abortion. They are being painted with that same brush. And in the past, that they've been able to separate themselves from that brush. And while we saw a close race in the governor's race a year ago, we're seeing a lot of races where Republicans would have won those races that they can't win now because of that divide that's happened.
Yeah. One other question here is, the legislature, again, they were surprised that Jack Ciattarelli did so well as he did in 2021. Now the legislature is going to be up again. And would you say that they were kind of, really wanting to see how this played out, because it's going to affect how they're running come next November?
Right. I think so. I mean, again, the legislative map is a little different than the congressional map. Smaller districts, more safe districts, easier to draw because of how much smaller they are. But there's a couple of places where they're probably going to write off any Democratic chances, and there are places that are going to write off any Republican chances, just simply because of how ingrained this new political divide is. There are very few. When we talk about the unaffiliated voter in New Jersey, because there are a large number of voters who don't sign up officially on their registration with a political party because they don't vote in primaries. But that doesn't mean they're not partisan. And the vast majority of them now have decided that they're a Democrat or a Republican, and that's how they vote all the time.
Is it difficult when you're polling people to tell if they're pulling your leg? How hard is that? It was just kind of coming to mind, when you talk about all of the independents, and now they're kind of saying, hey, just because I'm independent doesn't mean I'm not affiliated. I'm just not going to vote in the primary. So is it hard to really get that information out of people to tell where they're really going, to be able to take that pulse, get that snapshot, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, what you have to do is you have to ask a lot of questions around issues and so forth, because what we have is a lot of people who call themselves independents because they want to maintain that perspective. But it's very easy once you start asking them questions to figure out what side they're going to fall on. Once, that's why we do that in our polling. It doesn't just ask about who you're going to vote for. It asks a lot of things about where you stand on the issues, what really motivates you. That gives us a better picture of who they are, so they can call themselves an independent if they want. But we really have a better read of their underlying partisan inclination because of that.
All right, Patrick Murray, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today. It's good seeing you.
It's good seeing you too, Laura.
Infrastructure is an issue that's getting a lot of attention in Washington, D.C. Recently, Governor Phil Murphy unveiled a $2.7 billion Terminal A at Newark Liberty International Airport.
We are here today to bury the old Terminal A, not to praise it. We will save our praise for this new, modern, bright, comfortable, expressive, frankly, extraordinary Terminal A. The new Terminal A that is ready to accommodate, I think, more than 13 million annual visitors and their luggage, by the way. A new Terminal A that is the largest design-build project, as Kevin mentioned, in state history, and the largest infrastructure project that I've seen completed during my time as governor. A new Terminal A that is expected to generate more than $4.6 billion for our regional economy and directly provide more than $1.9 billion in wages to the women and men who work here.
Construction took more than 4 years. It houses 33 gates and is about 20% larger than the previous terminal. The new facility also includes technology upgrades, including touchless security checkpoints and new options for dining and shopping. Joining me now is Micah Rasmussen. He's the director of the Rebovitz Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Micah, it's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Absolutely. Well, let's get your 2 cents how you thought the midterms played out here in New Jersey.
So there weren't really any surprises, right? The one big story of note was that Tom Kean beat Tom Malinowski, but we really expected that given the way that the map was redrawn to benefit Tom Kean in that district. It was expected. And other than that, there were really no surprises. We thought that maybe some of the incumbents like Andy Kim and Mikey Sherrill and Josh Gottheimer might face a little bit tougher opposition this time if a red wave had materialized. We didn't see that happen. And so they all won by fairly comfortable margins.
Right. So no big surprises in New Jersey, but you mentioned that red wave. What are you and other people who watch this, what are you making of it that there wasn't a red wave? Because typically whoever is in power, they lose seats no matter who you are. And that just really didn't happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Democrats seem to have escaped the midterm rule of losing seats when you have the White House. And it's not that they won't lose seats. They will. I think they'll wind up losing the House of Representatives by just a couple of seats, and they will keep control in the Senate. And so that is the best performance for any party in power, really in 75 years. And so it's amazing. And the bottom line is, across the country, the Democrats came out to vote and Republicans didn't in the numbers that they needed to. And that's a very basic way of saying that Democrats were motivated. I think they were fired up. I think that some of the reports of the wave was enough to motivate them to get out and to want to counter that. I think there was a penalty for the abortion decision. I think that there was a penalty for the insurrection. And so all those things fired up Democrats to come out and vote. Young people voted in record numbers. And, Republicans just didn't get the numbers that they needed to counter that.
Yeah, so now that people are still, and they'll be pouring through the election results and looking at it, what does it mean? So how does it impact not only what happens in Congress and how the legislative agenda is put forth, but how does that affecting those in New Jersey who are going to be running for re-election? Because in 2023, our entire legislature is up for re-election.
Right. So I think that in Washington, on the Senate side, it means that President Biden will have a foothold legislatively. He will not have lost both houses of Congress. That's going to mean that Congress can't start putting things on his desk that he doesn't want there. And so it really leaves the administration and Democrats very much in the driver's seat in Washington. There will be power sharing because the Republicans will have a foothold as well. It'll be more shared power, but the Democrats have not lost both houses. And so it's going to mean accommodations will have to be reached, compromises will have to be reached. But I think the public has shown that they're pretty confident that Biden can reach across the aisle on some legislative priorities. What it means closer to home in New Jersey is that Democrats won a number of key races across the state, not just even for Congress. They kept control of the Gloucester County Board of Commissioners, for example, and the Somerset Board of Commissioners. The Republicans won control in Cumberland in South Jersey for the first time in many years. And so both parties are going to feel energized going into next year. Republicans definitely feel that they are working hard, that they're energized, but Democrats have shown that they can win too. They won the governor's race last year, closer than expected margin, put some wind at the Republicans' back, but Democrats have come roaring back this year, and I think are going to be a little more energized going into next year.
One of the things I keep hearing a lot about is how voters in this midterm election sent a message that they were really tired of the far extremes from both parties. So as we head into a re-election campaign in New Jersey, how will that look? Because, people, they don't want the partisanship. They're tired of it, but it makes for good TV or nasty campaign ads.
Yeah.
So will we see a kinder campaign for
That's a great
2023?
question. And I always tell my students, right, there's one reason why negative campaigning is done, and that's because it works, right? So they wouldn't be doing it if it didn't work. And everybody says they don't like it, but it works and it's effective. I don't think you're going to see a fundamental departure from that. I think that what you may see is that both sides are going to be a little more moderated in their politics. I think that extreme politics was rejected this election. I think that, to the extent that there were election deniers out there, people did not really have use for that. There were 12 Secretary of State candidates around the country who were election deniers. Every single one of them was rejected. So this was a big win for democracy in that regard. Not a partisan win, but a win for democracy. And I think that to the extent that candidates of either party can sort of shoot for the middle, that's what voters, I think, this time said they wanted to see more of.
Yeah, I'm curious as you, when you're not talking to me, when you're not doing other events and talking about elections, when you're in with your class, what are your students picking up on? What are they saying? Some of them probably for the first time they were able to vote for the first time. What are they talking about? What are you discussing in your class? I'd love to be a fly on the wall. So why don't you
no,
let us
that's
in?
great. I'm glad you asked. They were very concerned with reproductive rights this year. They were very concerned by what happened with Roe being overturned. They are really motivated by that, but they're also motivated by bread and butter issues. I had a couple of students, believe it or not, who are running for school board in their town, and really motivated to want to make sure their schools are better and their schools are not being politicized. We saw a lot of school board candidates in a lot of towns across the state who have more activist agendas, and I would say that both of my students were sort of responding to that and wanted good people to serve on their boards. Neither of them won, but they certainly feel like they got a foothold in their service that they're going to make to their community. They were asked to be more involved following their elections. So I would say it really runs the gamut, but they are feeling very connected by their politics, which I have to say, maybe as opposed to our generation, a little more so, a little more concretely feeling connected to their community. And as I said, if young people hadn't voted in the numbers they did this time, you would have seen a different result in these elections.
Yeah, I really think it is young people and their engagement because, during COVID, a lot paid close attention to what was happening and really got energized. But many can be turned off by that partisanship and just say, you know what, I don't want it. But you're seeing that students are engaged and they are
am.
enthusiastic.
And Laura, I think at the height of the Trump years, there was more of a turnoff. Politics was more of a dirty word. We may already be moving past that. We may already be moving to the point where students are gravitating back toward their politics. And that's how it feels. Early days, early times, but I'm feeling a renewed sense of engagement.
Final thoughts on what we might need to watch out as the New Jersey political scene in New Jersey comes to a close for 2022 before we get into full gear re-election for the legislature?
Great question. So I think that we can look for lower turnout elections next year. They are a little lower profile races, right? They're not as high profile as Congress or as governor or as president. This is going to be the lowest turnout and the lowest engagement of any year in our process. That means it's going to be really for more hardcore political types. The legislature is very important. We have a very active legislature, but it's one that you got to be an insider to be paying some attention to. So I think next year is going to be more for people like us who watch this stuff every day.
The real political junkies.
There you go. Yep.
Micah Rasmussen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it.
Next week on New Jersey Politics, we are looking ahead to the issues lawmakers are taking away from the midterm elections with Ben Dworkin. He's the director of the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship at Rowan University.
Well, look, there's a lot. I think what we know today is that it was surprising. The fact is, most people looking at this election really thought that the fundamental dynamics of national politics, you had high inflation at 8%, you had an unpopular president, you had a historical record that said the first midterm of a president, especially one that's unpopular with a bad economy, is going to be really good for the party that's not in the White House. We expected this to be a pretty solid year for the Republicans. And the fact that they didn't meet those expectations was surprising.
Then I speak with Regina Agia of Garden State Initiative about transitioning to clean energy. What will that look like here in New Jersey?
Well, I think they put the cart before the horse. They've set a goal, and without regard to, I think, the implications for both the quality of life in our state as well as the cost of living in our state. So I think that I would go back and revisit that. What is it that we think is a reasonable cost of transition and compromise for the transition to the renewables, then set the goal and pursue it. So I think it's just been done a little bit backwards. And I think more collaboration on that with a broader set of individuals participating in how those goals should be set would be a really much better received by the state.
And that will do it for today. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.